I feel like I have the coolest houseplant in New York right now, and every single winter this happens, my orange bird of paradise just bursts into full bloom. And what if I told you I did absolutely nothing to deserve these blooms? An orange bird of paradise just has this way of literally bottling up the sunshine during the summertime and saving it for later. Don't you wish you could do that in the winter? That's exactly what happens here. The flowers develop over the course of a summer outside. The flower spades start to appear in October. At that point, they just look like little sticks of undeveloped leaves. They grow right in between the leaf base, so that's when you know that that flower is appearing, and it takes all of November, all of December, and most of January for those flowers to start developing. For me, they bloom on schedule. They always bloom late January all the way through early March, but in theory, an orange bird of paradise can bloom any time of the year, and it tends to sort of bloom in flushes. So you get multiple flower spades all at once. And when I had this plant in Florida, it would usually do it toward the winter time, and also late summer I would end up getting some blooms. But again, usually in the tropics, it ends up blooming whenever it wants to. For some reason, here in New York, it is always bloomed on schedule during the winter time. Same for when I lived in South Carolina, it just always bloomed on schedule as the coolest months of the year arrived. The really nice thing about having these blooms inside is, first of all, it doesn't seem like the lower light levels inside during the winter affect the plant's health. All of the flowers have already developed, they bloom totally normally, so that's a really nice plus. And the flowers actually last a little bit longer. The individual flowers, when I lived in Florida, would get beat up by the rain and the wind and all of the other elements that happen outside. But inside the house, I really don't have any of those outdoor problems. The flowers last about 6 weeks on average because the spades just keep on bringing new bursts of color. So you can see this is a younger one over here. It just has those two orange petals and then the blue. This is an older one that's been around for a few weeks now. That's the oldest orange and blue. You can see newer sets of that have continued to emerge from the beak. So you just keep on getting every week or so another set of orange and blue, and that allows the color to last about 6 weeks on each beak. The plant has to be quite big to start producing flowers. Mine had about 30 leaves or so. Doesn't necessarily need all 30 leaves on the actual plant for it to start flowering, but I noticed that's a pretty good rule of thumb. You can see my plant is really, really large. Obviously, it wasn't this big when it started blooming, but I definitely think the secret is that your plant has to be mature enough to start producing babies. So originally I had maybe 2 plants or so when I bought it. And now if you look inside this container, it is just absolutely loaded with baby bird of paradise plants. So those pups came from the original mother plant, and I think that's a pretty good indication that it's blooming size. But it's not always the case. Let me show you my yellow bird of paradise. So around the same time that I bought my orange bird of paradise, I also bought the yellow variety, which is called Mandela's Gold. It's the same species, it's just a yellow variation to the flowers. This plant is just as old. It has produced so many babies. I've had it for about 8 years now, but I have never gotten a bloom from it. So what's the reason? I honestly could not tell you. It does seem like once a bird of paradise starts blooming, it blooms reliably every single year, but getting it to that point really does take some patience. I've had so many people ask me, my orange bird of paradise isn't blooming, what's the problem? And sometimes it's not a problem and it's just an age thing. Although I will say that these plants seem to like to be root bound. Mine has been in the same container for many years. I just repotted it this past spring into larger containers because it was literally breaking the original container. And it actually bloomed a little bit less this year than it did last year in that smaller container. I had 6 blooms last year. This year I have 4 coming up. Still, very healthy plant. It's grown huge, and I'm really happy with the way that it's taken to its new container. So in the long run, I think it's a good thing, but I just wanted to sort of let you know that it doesn't like to have its roots disturbed. And it is a beautiful plant even when it's not in bloom, I have to be honest. At first, I kind of hated the way it looked. I felt like it was kind of a straggly plant, but the older it gets, the more leaves it develops, I think the more beautiful it looks. The white bird of paradise is such a statement piece. It has those giant leaves, but it just doesn't have the showy flowers. And the leaves, they get a little bit too wide, a little bit too tall for them to stay in a container forever. And I think that the orange bird of paradise is just a nice compromise because it's one of those few tropical plants that we can grow in our houses during the winter time up north and not feel guilty. There's so many tropical plants that I've had over the years that I just watch kind of suffocate in its roots because, you know, it's just not the climate for it, and they don't want to be in pots forever. But an orange bird of paradise or a yellow one, the, you know, big positive is that they actually like being in containers. Behind this orange bird of paradise is a little bit of hope. I saw this today and my face just lit up. It's my hibiscus. It dropped every single leaf when it went inside the house because it went into shock. I actually left it outside until mid or late November, which was late even for me. I went to Tokyo and I had a couple of plants that I just didn't have time to bring in before my trip. So I had to wait until I came back, and at that point we already had many, many nights in the 30s, but my beautiful hibiscus, as much as it hated its life when it went inside the house and dropped all those leaves, it has come back so nicely. I have a grow light dangling on top of it. Oh my gosh, before I end this video, I have to show you another plant that's blooming. Wait a second. 2 plants actually. So this wasn't the one I was going to show you, but my Ponderosa Lemon is starting to bloom. Usually I kind of bring it in and out of the house throughout the winter to keep it from blooming this early because I want it to bloom when it's outside in April so that way all the pollinators can get to it. But it's been such a cold winter, I've kept it inside the house. I keep my house at like 60 degrees, by the way, so that way my plants don't grow too quickly. I do occasionally keep it a little bit above 60 when I have guests over. But anyway, despite all of that, this plant has decided to start producing some flowers. Let me show you the other plant that I intended to show you that has a surprise bloom. This is my Philodendron cortatum. I'm gonna kind of step out and show you what it looks like. Beautiful, naturally glossy leaves. I do nothing for those leaves to be that glossy. It just does it all on its own. And then you can see the beautiful flower spade, a very rare thing to see, a philodendron in bloom. It is so happy, clearly really grateful that I brought it inside yet again. It spends the summer outside right by my pond, right against the fountain. And what's really interesting is that it always sends roots that kind of go into the pond. So it's a water hogger, and I'm very surprised that it's happy enough to bloom inside the house because I definitely underwater it. But at the same time, I've seen philodendrons thriving in the shade in places like California where they really don't get a lot of light and a lot of water. Philodendron are fine without the light, but that lack of water, I was surprised to see some philodendron species just climbing the trees so beautifully in California. I remember the first time I saw that, I was just a kid in San Diego on a little family trip, and I was like, this is so cool. And now it's living in my house. Didn't see that one coming. Anyway, I'll let you all go. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for watching, and let me know in the comments if you have any plants that are surprising you, or if you have an orange bird of paradise, or especially a yellow one. If you have a yellow bird of paradise, we have got to talk because I don't understand why mine isn't blooming, and I'm not even sure yet that it's a yellow bird of paradise because I've never actually seen it bloom. So after all of these years, maybe the nursery even mislabeled it and it ends up being orange. That would be devastating. It's happened to me before. I planted a yellow watermelon and it ended up not being yellow. So I'm used to disappointment. But with every disappointment in the garden world comes a surprise, so it all balances out. I'll see you all soon. Stay warm, and if you have warm weather, please send it my way or, invite me over. Bye.